Everyone talks about wanting to be smarter. They fantasize about genius, about having a mind so powerful that people stare in awe, whisper your name, call you gifted. But that fantasy leaves out the truth. The real truth is darker. Real intelligence doesn't get applause. It gets distance. A truly sharp mind doesn't blend in. It becomes a mirror people don't want to look into. It sees too much. It cuts too deep. It uncovers patterns that others avoid, deny, fear, even in themselves. And once your brain learns to see on that level, once you start catching what everyone else misses, there's no unseeing it, no going back to being normal. You'll notice how slowly everyone thinks, how blind they are to their own lives. You won't fit in with them anymore, not because you don't want to, but because you simply can't. And that's when you discover the cost. You won't just be misunderstood, you'll be resented, you'll be feared. Some people will hate you for thinking the way they never could. This brain training protocol will push you to that threshold. It won't just sharpen you beyond any so-called gifted genius walking around today. It may reshape you into something that ordinary minds cannot live comfortably beside. And before we go any further, understand this. This isn't about memorizing facts. It isn't about reading faster or taking online courses. This is about rewiring how your brain processes reality itself. Most people think intelligence is about what you know. That's the lie. Real intelligence is about how you think, how you decode the invisible, how you process what others can't even recognize exists. What I'm about to show you will permanently change that processing system. Once it happens, there's no reverse gear. Are you ready? The first thing you need to understand is that everything you were taught about intelligence is wrong. They told you intelligence is something you're born with, that some kids are gifted and others aren't, that IQ is fixed, that smart people just naturally understand things faster. All of that is a lie, not a well-intentioned mistake. A lie that serves a system that benefits from most people never discovering their actual cognitive potential. Here's the truth. Intelligence is pattern recognition across contexts. That's it. That's the entire game. The ability to see that the same structure is repeating in different domains and to use that recognition to navigate complexity. A person who can see that power dynamics in their family function identically to power dynamics in their workplace is demonstrating real intelligence. A person who recognizes that the way water flows around obstacles mirrors, the way conversation flows around uncomfortable truths is demonstrating real intelligence. A person who can feel emotional weather shift in a room before anyone speaks is demonstrating real intelligence. None of that shows up on a standardized test. None of that gets you labeled gifted in second grade. But all of it determines whether you can actually operate effectively in reality. So what are those so-called gifted kids actually doing? They're demonstrating early pattern recognition, usually because something in their environment required them to develop that skill earlier than their peers. Maybe they had unpredictable parents and needed to read emotional cues to stay safe. Maybe they experienced something painful and their brain coped by finding structure in chaos. Maybe they were just bored and started noticing patterns because their mind needed something to do. There's a truth hiding here that nobody wants to say out loud. A massive percentage of gifted children are actually traumatized children who developed hyper-awareness as a survival mechanism. They're not smarter because of genetics. They're faster at processing because their nervous system learned that missing cues could be dangerous. What we call intelligence and what we call hypervigilance are often the same cognitive process in different contexts. And this matters. This matters because if intelligence is a learned response to environmental pressure, then you can develop it now. As an adult, on purpose. You don't need to have been the gifted kid. You just need to be willing to do what they did accidentally. Learn to see structure instead of content. Let me show you what I mean. Most people, when they look at an argument between two people about money, they see the content. He thinks she spends too much. She thinks he's controlling. They're fighting about a specific purchase. Content, content, content. And if you try to resolve that argument by addressing the content, you will fail every single time. The structure is the problem. The pattern underneath. Maybe he feels powerless in his life and money is where he can exert control. Maybe she feels unseen and buying things is how she gives herself pleasure. Maybe they both grew up poor with completely different coping mechanisms around scarcity. Maybe neither learned how to have conflict without it meaning the relationship is ending, so every money fight is actually a fight about safety. A person with structural intelligence sees past the content to the pattern. And once you see the pattern, you can address the actual issue. You can work with it. You can predict it. This is what people call good intuition. It's not magic, it's structural awareness. And here's the beautiful, terrible truth. Once you learn to see structure, you see it everywhere. In your behavior, in politics, in history, in nature, everywhere. You can never take those glasses off. The world stops being random and starts being predictable. And that changes everything. So the question becomes, how do you train your brain to see this way? How do you develop pattern recognition if it didn't happen automatically when you were young? That's what we're building toward. But before I give you the method, I need to destroy one more illusion. The illusion that you're thinking in your native language. Here's what's actually happening. You have thoughts, real thoughts, fast, accurate, complete thoughts. They arrive as felt sense, as whole system awareness, as pattern recognition. You just know things. But you can't say that. You can't say, I just know. People will think you're arrogant or irrational. So you translate. You reverse engineer your knowing into something that sounds like you got there through logic. You create a false trail of reasoning that leads to your true conclusion. You package your intelligence in acceptable wrapping paper. I call this the translator's trap. And it's exhausting you. Imagine being fluent in 2 languages but having to translate every single thought before you speak. English thought, Spanish words. English thought, Spanish words. All day. Every day. How long before you're completely drained? How long before you start feeling slow even though you're not? That's what you're doing with your intelligence. You're thinking in one language, your authentic, wild, systemic intelligence, and translating it into another language before you're allowed to speak. The language of acceptable intelligence. The language of not being too weird, too intense, too strange. The smartest thing you can do is stop translating. Start speaking your first language. Start saying, I don't know how I know this, but I know it. Start sharing your actual thought process instead of the sanitized version. Yes, some people will think you're crazy. That's the cost. But you'll get fast, really fast, because you're not spending half your processing power on translation anymore. And the people who matter, the people who are also thinking in their first language, they'll recognize you immediately. They'll feel the relief of finally meeting someone who isn't performing. Those connections will be deeper than anything you built while translating. Now let me give you the actual training, the method that will restructure your cognition in 90 days. This isn't theory. This is the exact process that separates people who think clearly from people who think in fog. The first drill is called Deep Question Isolation. Every single day, for 20 minutes, you sit alone with one question. No phone, no music, no distractions, just you, paper, and pen. Same place, same time if possible. The environment becomes a signal. Your brain learns this is where deep work happens. At the top of the page, you write one question. Not a fluffy question like, what is happiness? A sharp, specific, personal question. Something that actually bothers you, or something you want to master. Why do I freeze when someone criticizes me? What actually drives my decision-making? Why do I avoid conflict even when I'm right? Then you start writing every answer that comes to mind. The first answers will be weak, surface level, things you've heard before. Don't stop there. You push deeper by asking one word over and over. Why? Write an answer. Then ask, why is that true? Answer again. Then why? Keep drilling. Your brain will panic. It'll get uncomfortable. You'll think this is useless. That's the test. That's where most people quit. You don't stop. You keep attacking the question. Something will break. New thoughts will appear. Connections you never saw before. A hidden fear. A forgotten memory. A realization that recontextualizes your entire pattern. That's what you're digging for. At the end of the 20 minutes, you write one paragraph summarizing the most powerful thing you discovered. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to capture the insight. This becomes the seed you carry into tomorrow. Do this every day for 30 days. The first week feels boring. The second week feels uncomfortable. By the third week, something changes. Your brain starts doing it automatically. You'll notice you can strip any problem down faster than other people. You stop accepting easy answers. You see the cracks in people's logic. And by day 30, you've trained your mind to attack reality instead of floating on the surface. Let me give you an example. Your question is, why do I procrastinate on important projects? First answer, because I'm lazy. Why? Because I don't have discipline. Why don't I have discipline? Because I never learned it. Why does that matter now? Because without it, I can't achieve my goals. Why do your goals require discipline? Because they're long-term. Why does long-term feel impossible? Because I can't see the result. Why do you need to see the result? Because without proof, I don't believe it's real. Why don't you believe? Because I've failed before. Why does past failure predict future failure? It doesn't, unless I believe it does. Suddenly you realize the procrastination isn't about laziness. It's about a belief system that equates uncertainty with guaranteed failure. That's a completely different problem with a completely different solution. And you got there in 10 minutes of aggressive questioning. Now multiply that by 30 days. 30 different questions. 30 breakthroughs. And more importantly, the habit of thinking this way becomes permanent. Your brain learns to cut through excuses, illusions, and comfortable lies. You develop what I call penetrative thinking, the ability to drive straight to the core of any issue. But be warned, this drill will change how you see yourself and others. You will uncover truths that are uncomfortable. You may realize you've been living by assumptions that collapse under inspection. You may feel disturbed by what you write. That's not a bug, that's the feature. Intelligence is not born in comfort. If it feels heavy, you're doing it right. The danger is stopping halfway. If you quit when the answers get uncomfortable, you've just trained your brain that it can run away from truth. So push past the wall every single time. This is not optional. This is the foundation of everything else. The second drill is information weaponization. Most people consume information like entertainment. They scroll, read, watch, and forget. Knowledge goes in, gets lost in the fog of their brain, and never returns. That's why most people, even after years of reading, cannot actually use what they know. Their memory is a graveyard of wasted facts. You will not be like them. From now on, you treat every piece of information as a tool. You don't read for comfort. You don't watch for fun. You force everything you encounter into something you can use. Here's how it works. You're reading a book. Most people highlight a nice quote, feel smart, and forget it forever. You stop. You ask, how can this be used? Could this principle give me leverage in a negotiation? Could this idea help me understand someone's behavior? Could this framework solve a problem I've been avoiding? Could this reshape how I make decisions? You write it down, but not as a passive note. You write it as an active tool. Example, you read that people fear loss more than they desire gain. You don't just admire the idea, you write, tool, in any pitch or persuasion, frame the cost of inaction as a loss, not the benefit of action as a gain. People move faster to avoid loss. Every day you capture at least 3 tools. They can come from anywhere, a book, a conversation, a YouTube video, an article. What matters is that you immediately convert information into application. If you don't, it will fade. At the end of each week, you have 21 tools. You review them, you rank them, you pick the 3 strongest and imagine how you would use them in real life. You play out the scenario in your mind. You write the script. Do this long enough and something extraordinary happens. You stop being a passive receiver of information. You become an active operator. When someone argues with you, you already have the framework. When someone tries to manipulate you, you recognize the pattern instantly because you've studied it and turned it into a counterweapon. When a problem appears, you reach into your mental arsenal and pull out the exact tool you need. Think about what this gives you. The average person forgets 90% of what they read within a week. You're building a permanent, organized, immediately accessible library of cognitive weapons. After 90 days, you'll have nearly 300 tools. After a year, over 1,000. You become a walking armory of applied intelligence. But here's the shadow side. When you weaponize information, you stop seeing it as beautiful or interesting for its own sake. You stop being a spectator. You start treating every word, every detail, every interaction as either useful or useless. This makes you effective, but it can make you cold. You gain control, but you lose a certain innocence. Some people will look at you and sense you're calculating. They won't be able to explain why, but they'll feel like you're always thinking 3 moves ahead. And they'll be right. That's the trade. The average person is warm but powerless. The trained person is powerful but calculated. You decide which you want to be. The third drill is pattern harvesting. At this stage, you stop looking at the world like everyone else. Most people see random events, random faces, random words. You will train yourself to see patterns, repeated loops, hidden structures, the invisible architecture that guides human behavior. Here's the truth. Human beings are not as complex as they think. We all repeat. The way someone laughs when nervous, the word they use before disagreeing, the way their eyes move when they're uncomfortable. These are signals, but the untrained mind ignores them. The trained mind collects them. Every day you choose one environment to observe. A bus ride, a cafe, your workplace, a family dinner. You sit quietly and instead of participating, you watch. You listen. You take notes. At first it feels strange. You'll feel restless. But then you'll start to notice the person who touches their face every time they're about to lie. The colleague who changes the subject when they feel threatened. The friend who laughs too quickly after speaking, as if begging for approval. These patterns are invisible to them, but clear to you. When you see a pattern, you write it down. Not as she seemed nervous, no. You write it as a code, signal, repeated touching of neck, and discomfort with topic being discussed. You name it. You record it. You build a dictionary of human signals. Do this for 30 days, and you'll have 30 patterns documented. Do it for 90 days, and you'll have nearly 100. The world stops being chaos. It becomes readable, predictable. Something will shift. A person will start a sentence, and before they finish, you'll know where it's going. Someone will move their hand, and you'll know their next reaction. You'll feel almost supernatural, but it's not magic. It's attention sharpened into a blade. The purpose isn't to judge people. The purpose is to understand them deeper than they understand themselves. And once you do, you control the interaction. You can anticipate resistance. You can amplify receptivity. You can guide conversations toward outcomes that serve you. That is power. But again, there's a cost. Once you see these loops, you can't unsee them. You'll notice that most people are running scripts, predictable patterns. They think they're free, but they're repeating the same behaviors in slightly different contexts. This realization can make you feel detached, like you're surrounded by machines pretending to be conscious. This is the loneliness of high-level pattern recognition. Still, this is non-negotiable. Every day, collect at least one pattern. After 30 days, you'll have 30 behavioral codes. After 90, you'll read people like open books. And when people realize you understand them in ways they can't articulate, they will either fear you or follow you. There's rarely anything in between. The fourth drill is cognitive combat. This is where your mind becomes truly dangerous. Until now, you've learned to isolate questions, weaponize information, and harvest patterns. But here, you learn to split your thinking into two opposing forces and make them fight. Most people think one way. They believe something and defend it. They hate being wrong, so they protect their belief until they die. This is cognitive weakness. If you can only see one side, you're blind to half of reality. Once a week, you take a single proposition and force yourself to argue both sides with equal intensity, not casually, with full commitment. You pick a topic: freedom versus security, emotion versus logic, individual versus collective, punishment versus rehabilitation. Then you sit down. For 20 minutes, you defend one side with everything you have. You write as if you're absolutely right. You marshal every argument, every example, every emotional appeal. You give it everything. When time's up, you stop, you switch, and for the next 20 minutes, you destroy what you just built. You argue the exact opposite with equal passion. You dismantle your own arguments. You find the holes. You build the countercase. At first, this feels wrong. Your brain resists. You'll think, but I don't actually believe this side. That's the point. You're not training belief, you're training flexibility. You're breaking the chains that lock most people into single perspective thinking. Do this correctly, and something terrifying happens. You realize every truth can be attacked, every position can be defended, every moral stance can be inverted. Nothing is as solid as it seemed. Everything can be reframed. This is disturbing for most people, but it's liberation for you. Because once you can inhabit both sides of any issue, you're no longer controlled by either. You can pick whichever perspective serves you in the moment. You become ideologically fluid. Think about what this gives you. Someone argues with you. You've already internalized both sides of the debate. You know their position better than they do. You know its weaknesses before they reveal them. Someone tries to manipulate you with ideology. You see through it instantly because you've already argued that position and its opposite. But there's a cost. When you master this, your sense of certainty fades. The world stops looking black and white. You realize most people live inside comfortable illusions, clinging to good and bad, true and false. But you see that both sides are just tools. You can pick one, use it, and discard it when it's no longer useful. People will call you immoral. They'll say you stand for nothing. Maybe they're right. Or maybe you just see more than they can handle. Maybe you've realized that certainty is a luxury for people who haven't thought deeply enough. The drill is simple. Choose a proposition. Argue one side for 20 minutes. Switch. Argue the opposite for 20 minutes. At the end, write down the strongest point from each side and ask, if both contain truth, what does that reveal about the nature of reality? Do this once a week. That's 52 cognitive battles per year. After 6 months, your thinking will be sharper, faster, more lethal than 99% of people. You won't just think, you'll dominate any intellectual space you enter. This is the core training. 4 drills, 90 days if you want full integration. But you'll notice changes within 30. Deep question. Isolation teaches you to think penetratively. Information. Weaponization teaches you to extract value from everything. Pattern harvesting teaches you to read human behavior. Cognitive combat teaches you to hold multiple realities simultaneously. Combined, these drills do something most people think is impossible. They fundamentally restructure how your brain processes information. You stop being a passive receiver. You become an active shaper of reality. But let me be clear about something. This training will change you in ways you can't predict. You will become more effective, more perceptive, more powerful. You will also become more isolated, because the gap between how you see and how others see will widen every single day. You'll sit in conversations and hear the holes in people's logic. You'll watch them repeat the same patterns and wonder why they can't see it. You'll feel like you're speaking a different language, because in a sense, you are. You've trained yourself to see structure while they're still looking at surfaces. Some relationships won't survive this. Not because you're better than those people, but because shared reality is the foundation of intimacy. When your reality shifts and theirs doesn't, the connection breaks. Some people will drift away. Others will actively push you out because your presence makes them uncomfortable in ways they can't name. This is the loneliness I warned you about. It's real, it's painful, and it's the price of cognitive development. You're going to have to decide if it's worth it. Only you can answer that. But here's what I can promise you. If you push through that loneliness, if you keep developing even when it's isolating, you will eventually find your people. The others who have done this work. The others who see what you see. And when you find them, the connection will be unlike anything you've experienced. Because you won't have to translate. You won't have to perform. You won't have to hide. You can just be intelligent together. Those relationships are rare, but they're real, and they're worth the wait. Now let me give you the principles that hold all of this together. The underlying truths that make these drills effective. Because without understanding the why, you're just following instructions. With understanding, you can adapt and evolve the practice to fit your specific cognition. Principle 1. Intelligence is not a possession, it's a process. You don't have intelligence, you do intelligence. It's not a static trait like height. It's a dynamic engagement with complexity. The moment you stop engaging, you stop being intelligent. This is why someone can be brilliant at 25 and unremarkable at 45. They stopped doing the process. The drills I've given you are the process. They keep you engaged. They keep you sharp. They prevent cognitive calcification. Do them consistently and your intelligence increases. Stop doing them and it atrophies. It's that simple. Principle 2. Pattern recognition is the universal cognitive skill. Every domain of intelligence, mathematical, linguistic, spatial, emotional, strategic, is built on pattern recognition. If you can see that the same structure appears in different contexts, you can transfer skills across domains. This is why genuinely intelligent people seem to be good at everything. They're not. They're just good at seeing structure, and structure transfers. The pattern harvesting drill directly trains this, but so do the others. Deep question. Isolation teaches you to see patterns in your own thinking. Information. Weaponization teaches you to see patterns in utility. Cognitive combat teaches you to see patterns in argument structure. All roads lead to pattern recognition. Principle 3. Cognitive flexibility beats cognitive capacity. It doesn't matter how smart you are if you're rigid. A flexible mind with average processing power will outperform a brilliant mind locked into one way of seeing. This is why ideology is poison for intelligence. The moment you commit to a fixed worldview, you sacrifice adaptability. Cognitive combat directly trains flexibility. But all 4 drills require you to move between different modes of thinking. This keeps you fluid, and fluidity is survival in a complex environment. Principle 4. Intelligence creates responsibility. The more you see, the more you're responsible for. You can't claim ignorance once you've trained yourself to notice patterns. You can't pretend you don't see someone's manipulation once you've learned to read behavior. You can't avoid difficult truths once you've developed penetrative thinking. This is the weight I keep mentioning. Intelligence isn't just power, it's obligation. The obligation to act on what you know, to speak truth, even when it's costly, to navigate complexity instead of hiding in simplicity. Not everyone is ready for that burden. Principle 5. Loneliness is the tax on clarity. The clearer you see, the fewer people can see with you. This isn't elitism, it's geometry. If you're operating in multiple dimensions and others are operating in one, you're not better, you're just elsewhere. And elsewhere is lonely. But loneliness isn't the same as being alone. You can be surrounded by people, and lonely if you can't share your full perception. And you can be physically alone and not lonely if you're at peace with your own cognition. The goal isn't to avoid loneliness. The goal is to make peace with it as part of the development process. These 5 principles are your compass. When you're confused about the training, come back to them. They'll orient you. Now let me address the question that's probably forming in your mind. What happens after 90 days? What comes after the core training? The honest answer is, it depends on what you want to do with this intelligence. Because intelligence without direction is just noise. It needs to serve something. It needs to be aimed. Some people will take this training and use it to build businesses. They'll apply pattern recognition to markets, information weaponization to strategy, cognitive combat to negotiation. They'll become formidable operators. Some will use it for creative work. They'll see patterns in human emotion and turn them into art. They'll weaponize storytelling. They'll harvest behavioral insights and reflect them back in ways that move people. Some will use it for relationships. They'll understand people so deeply that they become master communicators, therapists, leaders, or guides. They'll know how to meet people where they are and take them where they need to go. And some will use it for personal liberation. They'll simply want to see clearly, to think without illusion, to be free from the scripts and patterns that run most people's lives. They won't necessarily build anything external. They'll just live with more awareness, more choice, more agency. All of these are valid, but you need to choose. Because undirected intelligence becomes corrosive. It turns into cynicism, nihilism, detachment. You need a purpose that's bigger than just being smart. Otherwise, the weight of seeing clearly without being able to do anything with it will crush you. So as you're doing these 90 days of training, start asking yourself, what do I want to use this for? What's the point of becoming more intelligent? What am I building toward? You don't need the perfect answer, but you need an answer, even a provisional one, something that gives your development direction and meaning. Let me also address something practical. You're probably wondering, can I really do all 4 drills every day? Won't that take hours? Here's the truth. Deep question isolation is 20 minutes. Information. Weaponization is maybe 10 minutes spread throughout the day as you encounter information. Pattern harvesting is observational. It happens during activities you're already doing. Cognitive combat is once a week for 40 minutes. Total daily time investment, 30 to 40 minutes plus 1 weekly session. That's it. Less time than most people spend scrolling social media before bed. But here's the key. These 30 to 40 minutes need to be protected. Non-negotiable, sacred. Because the moment you start skipping, you've told your brain that this doesn't matter, and your brain will believe you. Consistency beats intensity. 30 minutes every day for 90 days will transform you. 3 hours once a week will do almost nothing. The drills work through repetition and accumulation, through building neural pathways, through making new patterns of thought automatic. So don't negotiate with yourself. Don't tell yourself you'll do it later. Don't convince yourself that you're too busy. If you have time to watch this video, you have time to do the drills. It's not about time, it's about priority. Now let's talk about what you'll notice as you progress through the 90 days. Days 1 to 10. Discomfort and resistance. The first 10 days will feel awkward. Your brain isn't used to thinking this way. The deep question drill will feel forced. You'll struggle to go deeper than surface answers. Information weaponization will feel mechanical. Pattern harvesting will make you feel like a creep for observing people so closely. Cognitive combat will feel impossible because you'll resist arguing for positions you don't hold. This is normal. This is your brain resisting change. Push through it. The discomfort is a sign you're actually growing. Days 11 to 30. Breakthrough and integration. Somewhere in this window something clicks. Usually during a deep question session, you'll have your first real breakthrough. You'll go deeper than you knew you could go and discover something about yourself that recontextualizes your entire pattern. This is when you realize the drills actually work. Pattern harvesting starts revealing consistent signals. You'll notice the same behavioral loops in different people. Information weaponization becomes more natural. You start automatically converting what you read into tools without having to force it. Days 31 to 60. Acceleration and alienation. This is when it gets interesting and difficult simultaneously. Your thinking accelerates noticeably. Problems that used to take you days to work through now take hours. Conversations that used to confuse you now reveal their structure immediately. You start predicting outcomes before they happen. But this is also when the social cost becomes real. You'll be in a conversation and realize you're 3 steps ahead of everyone else. You'll see someone making a choice you know will hurt them, and you won't be able to explain how you know without sounding arrogant. You'll feel the first real pangs of cognitive loneliness. This is the danger zone. This is where a lot of people quit, because the gap between who you're becoming and who you were is now wide enough to be uncomfortable. Your old friends might not get you anymore. Your old habits might feel intolerably stupid. You're between identities, and that space is destabilizing. If you can push through this phase, you make it to the other side. Days 61-90. Stabilization and power. By this point, the drills are habitual. You don't have to force yourself anymore. Your brain wants to do them. Deep question. Isolation feels meditative. Information weaponization is automatic. Pattern harvesting is constant. Cognitive combat is recreational. You notice you're thinking in fundamentally different ways. You hold paradox without stress. You see systems instead of stories. You predict behavior with eerie accuracy. You extract value from everything you encounter. Your mind feels like a precision instrument instead of a blunt tool. People start reacting to you differently. Some are drawn to you without knowing why. Others avoid you without knowing why. A few recognize what you've done and either want to learn from you or compete with you. This is when you step into a different tier of cognition. You're not smarter in the sense of knowing more facts. You're smarter in the sense of seeing more structure. And structure is power. But let me give you one final warning. A warning about the shadow side of this work that nobody talks about. When you develop this level of intelligence, you gain the ability to manipulate, to control, to predict and exploit human behavior. And that ability is seductive. Because for maybe the first time in your life, you feel powerful. You feel like you're playing a game everyone else doesn't even know exists. And the temptation will be to use this power carelessly, to manipulate people for small gains, to show off your ability to read and control situations, to become the kind of person who treats every interaction as a game to win. I'm telling you right now, resist that temptation, because that path leads to a specific kind of hell. The hell of being surrounded by people you've manipulated into positions around you. The hell of never knowing if someone genuinely likes you or if you've just skillfully influenced them into liking you. The hell of being powerful but completely alone because you've turned every relationship into a strategic arrangement. Intelligence is not the same as wisdom. Intelligence gives you the ability to achieve outcomes. Wisdom helps you choose which outcomes are worth achieving. And the wisest thing you can do with the intelligence you're developing is to use it sparingly, carefully, and with genuine care for the people you're affecting. Use it to understand people, not to control them. Use it to see clearly, not to gain advantage. Use it to help, not to dominate. Because the person who uses intelligence as a weapon against others eventually becomes a prisoner of their own cleverness. They can't turn it off. They can't connect genuinely. They can't love or be loved without suspicion and strategy poisoning everything. I've seen people develop this kind of intelligence and become monsters. Not because they were bad people, but because they mistook power for purpose. They got so good at reading and influencing people that they forgot how to just be with people. Don't let that be you. As you develop these skills, develop your ethics alongside them. Decide what kind of person you want to be, once you're capable of things most people can't even imagine. Because capability without character is just sophisticated destruction. So here's what I want you to do after you've completed the 90 days. Take a week. Don't do any of the drills. Just live with your new cognition and notice what you do with it. Notice when you're tempted to manipulate. Notice when you use your perception to help versus when you use it to dominate. Notice what kind of person you're becoming. And then make a conscious choice. Choose the kind of intelligence you want to embody. The kind that serves or the kind that exploits. The kind that connects or the kind that isolates. The kind that builds or the kind that tears down. Because at the end of the day, intelligence is just a tool. And like any tool, it can be used to create or to destroy. The choice is always yours. We're coming to the end now, and I want to bring this back to where we started. With that question, once you see what I've shown you, can you ever unsee it? By now, you know the answer. No, you can't. Because I haven't just given you techniques. I've given you a lens, a way of seeing reality that's more accurate, more layered, more complex than the simplified version most people live with. You've learned that intelligence isn't a gift, it's a process. That pattern recognition is the universal skill. That flexibility beats capacity. That clarity creates responsibility. That loneliness is the tax on growth. You've learned the 4 core drills that will restructure your cognition in 90 days. Deep question, isolation to think penetratively. Information, weaponization to extract value from everything. Pattern harvesting to read human behavior. Cognitive combat to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously. You've learned the principles that make it all work. And you've learned the warnings about what this development will cost you and what temptations it will create. But ultimately, knowledge isn't enough. Understanding isn't enough. You have to actually do the work. You have to sit down for 20 minutes today and start the first deep question drill. You have to capture your first 3 information weapons. You have to observe and record your first behavioral pattern. You have to schedule your first cognitive combat session. Because here's the truth that separates people who change from people who just think about changing. Transformation requires action, not intention, not inspiration. Action. Daily, consistent, unglamorous action. Most people who watch this video will feel excited for about an hour. They'll think, yes, this is exactly what I need. And then they'll go back to their normal life. They'll scroll their phone. They'll watch another video. They'll tell themselves they'll start tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. Don't be most people. You're not broken. You're not limited. You're not stuck with the brain you have. You're just untrained. And training is available to you right now. Today, this moment, the intelligence you're capable of, the clarity, the perception, the power, it's not some distant possibility. It's 90 days away. 3 months of consistent practice. That's it. 3 months from now, you could be thinking in ways that seem impossible to you right now. But only if you start, only if you commit, only if you decide that seeing clearly is worth the discomfort, worth the loneliness, worth the responsibility. So here's my question for you. Are you actually going to do this? Or are you going to file this away as interesting information and move on with your life unchanged? Because I can't make you do the work. I can only show you what's possible and give you the method. The rest is up to you. If you're going to do this, if you're really going to commit to 90 days of cognitive training, I want you to do something right now. Write down today's date. Write down the date 90 days from now. And make yourself a promise. Not to me, to yourself. That you will do these drills every single day for 90 days. That you will not quit when it gets uncomfortable. That you will not stop when you feel lonely. That you will see it through to the end. And then start. Right now. Before the inspiration fades. Before the resistance builds. Before you talk yourself out of it. Write your first deep question. Sit with it for 20 minutes. See what happens. That's how transformation begins. Not with perfect conditions or motivation. With one question and 20 minutes of focused attention. If this resonated with you, if something in what I've said feels true and urgent and necessary, leave a comment. Tell me what question you're starting with. Tell me what you're hoping to understand about yourself. Tell me you're committing to the 90 days. Not for my benefit. For yours. Because publicly declaring a commitment makes it real. It moves it from the realm of maybe into the realm of actually happening. And if you want more work like this, more depth, more honesty, more methods for becoming the person you're capable of being, subscribe. Because this is just the beginning. There's so much more territory to explore. So many more illusions to dissolve. So many more ways to see clearly. But for now, this is enough. You have the method. You have the warnings. You have the map. The only question left is, will you walk the path? You're not becoming smarter. You're becoming honest. You're becoming accurate. You're becoming free. And that's rarer than genius. That's rarer than anything the world calls gifted. That's available to you. Starting now. I'll see you on the other side. But again, most people will not do this. They'll read about it, think it sounds interesting, and then go back to scrolling their phone. Because developing this level of intelligence requires something most people don't have. Discipline, consistency, and a willingness to sit alone with discomfort every single day. Most people would rather stay comfortable and weak than become uncomfortable and powerful. That's just the truth. Now let me give you a choice you can't pretend you didn't hear. You can walk away right now, go back to your comfortable routines, your recycled thoughts, your predictable life, and nothing will change. Or you can commit right here, right now, to training a mind powerful enough to terrify the people who never dared to build their own. If you're ready to go further, to train, not just watch, then do one thing. Subscribe. Not for entertainment, not for motivation, but as a contract with your future self. Then drop one sentence in the comments. I choose the mind. That sentence is your declaration, your starting point, your first act of rebellion against the version of you that stays weak. If you can't make that tiny commitment, you're not ready.